Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Nick Kanoki, Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm excited for our conversation with Al Green, a longtime federal executive with Department of Interior and Department of Homeland Security. He is retiring at the end of this month, we heard, but we'll hear from him in just a moment. We want to thank our Platinum organizational member, Onuma System, as well as our patron members, Definitive Logic, now a Mantech company, CGI, ABS Quality Evaluations, and Jacobs. And all our organizational members, really a big thank you for your continued support. We couldn't do programming like this in our newsletter and our upcoming event without you. And so now, as you may know, we have an upcoming event, January 10th, in person in Washington, D.C. at the Keck Center. And Mike Bordenero is going to say a few more things and maybe even show you a sneak peek of the agenda. But please join us January 10th.
Yes, thank you, Nick. I have an agenda that I'd like to share when
Okay.
the screen's available. I'd like to wish everyone happy ongoing holidays and a happy new year. And before we talk to Al, just really excited about what we're doing with the National Academies on January 10th. National Academies Federal Facility Council and the Asset Leadership Network are co-hosting this event, focused on optimizing real property investment at federal agencies. And we've got Daniel Platts from the United Nations giving a keynote speech. It's going to be talking about what the United Nations is doing with developing nations, and we're going to be not surprised at how common the asset management issues are, whether you're a developing nation or a developed nation. And then we'll be hearing from the U.S. Accountability Office on a report they've done on federal asset management, specifically deferred maintenance. And then the National Academy's strategies to renew federal facilities will be presented as a way of addressing asset management issues at federal real property departments. And then the afternoon, we have some invitations out to speakers. But even if we don't have an after lunch speaker, we've got 5 federal executives talking about the best practices that they are doing at their agencies and how they can be shared. So please go online and register for that. We've got links that'll get you to the National Academy's registration page, and we're really excited about that. So please join us. But now I'd like to welcome Jim Dieter, CEO of the Asset Leadership Network and chairman of our board, founder, to bring on Al Green. Jim knows Al longer than I do. I know that Al's been a fixture in national asset management and the National Property Management Association. But Jim, will you say a few words about Al?
Well, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we get really excited about the January event. So I've known Al Green so long, I can't really remember how long I've known Al. But we've both been had lots of roles in the National Property Management Association, nationally and at the local federal center chapter for many years. And I've had many good discussions and efforts over those times. Welcome, Al. It's good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jim. I'm very happy to be here today, have an opportunity to speak with all the team members and everything. My retirement after 24 years and 4 months will be tomorrow afternoon, starting around 2 o'clock, last until like 4 o'clock, I guess. My boss is planning a good ceremony for me, so I'm really appreciative of that. So I'm ending my my career in federal service with the last 3 years of being a safety and occupational health officer, unit division chief, and before that I had 3 years asset management division for immigration custom enforcement for Homeland Security. So the last I was able to get hired by a previous boss I worked for in the Department of Interior, where I worked for 17 years for federal service. That's where I actually got started with FEMA in 1999, December 1999. And I worked for FEMA for 3 years. I was the national educator for both basic and advanced disaster field office property custodians for those disaster sites nationwide. I worked with a person, maybe Jim, you might remember, it was Donald Smith, who retired from FEMA. And so one of the highlights with working there at FEMA was for the aftermath of 9/11. Actually served as the night director of logistics at FEMA headquarters on the task force for recovery efforts for Pennsylvania, New York, and Washington, D.C. And I played a role in getting portable showers from Kentucky all the way to through the Lincoln Tunnel, which argued with the police there. There were very tight control on who can enter that area, and apparently the driver didn't have authorization prior to getting there, so was able to work that and get those showers that needed recovery people at ground zero. So that was a high point there for working with FEMA. Also, not too many people know, but also the President Bush had stated that he wanted to get the New York Stock Exchange back on board for business at 9 o'clock on the following Monday. And the problem was that there was no electricity, no power. And so some of the discussions was bringing an aircraft carrier in, but then we thought about it being nuclear and so forth. So decided against that and ended up getting portable generators. And not everything was working, but it was enough to work to get the New York Stock Exchange open as the president said it would be. And I think it made a point to the entire world that we could get back standing after taking a hit like we did. So I think that was a really high point for FEMA. Also afterwards, I think the only time ever in my entire life, and probably will be, is that President Bush did come by and shook everybody's hand and thanked everyone for all the support that was provided. So I wished I got a picture with him so I could prove I actually met him and shook his hand, but everybody said it was their birthday. So it's amazing how everybody had a birthday. And I'm sitting there saying, well, maybe I should have a birthday too. So, but it was kind of neat with him going through. And then from there, I went down to Fish and Wildlife and served for 3 years. And that was a pretty neat position working in Arlington, Virginia, and ended up combining 8 different data systems into one data system. And that's before the Department of Interior inherited the financial business management system, which took like 17 years to get it on board. That took care of almost every category. So that was pretty interesting. And then from there, I went to the Office of Surface Mining for 6 years. Office of Surface Mining, another component, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Interior. And so I worked there for almost 6 years. It was good duty. It was the South Interior building, which is no longer there. I think they pretty well shut it down. It had to be renovated. And then I went over to serve as the personal property director or officer for the entire Department of Interior, where Mr. Ani, my previous predecessor boss, hired me not only there but also hired me for to work at Immigration Customs Enforcement. So basically, I've served 6 years at Department of Homeland Security. On the high points there, I think everybody had an effort in COVID and testing and so forth. And ICE has over 22,000 employees in 43 different foreign countries and nationwide and all the islands and so forth. So there was a lot of work with that. Had a team. It was called the ICE Logistics Personal Protective Equipment team. And those 20 members did a terrific job in support of the efforts that we had to do. And we spent over 2,700 million, over 27 million in PPE supplies once those supplies became available after first responders and hospitals and police so forth got those important items. So so after that, that 27 million, and then another high point, I guess I could say, in logistics for ICE was in 2018, I was able to work through our congressional representatives to get 84 million to refurbish and replenish some of the old vehicles that we had. About 8,000 of the 22,000 employees are law enforcement officers, and their vehicles were trash and they needed to be replaced. And so we're able to convince Congress to give $84 million, and we're able to get about a third of the fleet back up the way it should be to support their efforts and so forth. It's just like a police car. They had to have radios, and they also have different locking mechanisms to store their weapons and so forth when they're out. So it's very interesting. In 2019, Congress said, well, you got too much in 2018. They gave 0 in 2019. So it was a complete flip-flop. And but the thing of it is, you have to look out 8 years and think about replacement for those logistical items and so forth. So but then that's a headache for someone else right now. So that's pretty well everything in a nutshell for 24 years of federal service. Before that, I was logistics officer for 14 and a half years in the United States Air Force. Before that, I was enlisted as a supply specialist in NCO, and became a Mustang in 1981, graduated in 1981 from California State University. I was a distinguished graduate from ROTC. I've been in logistics for over 45 years and 3 years now of safety. So a total of 48 years. My wife and I, the great support from my wife, after 50 years, we just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary back in July.
Oh, awesome.
So we're looking for 50 more. So, but he's put up with me for all this time. And so we're looking forward to doing some RVing across the country in Tennessee and Florida and out west, and also following our grandchildren. And I plan on staying involved with ALN, and I've been kind of absent from National Park and Association for the last 3 or 4 years due to my duties with what I do, and there were some restrictions there about what I could do and what I couldn't do, and probably could have just did it on my own. And but I'm going to get more involved in PMA. I want to write articles for the property magazine, property professional magazine, like I did before, and so that's it in a nutshell. Any
So, Al, you
questions?
talked a lot about managing up. So that's, almost the definition of asset leadership, is getting senior leaders involved and understanding what they're doing, make a difference, and over a long term. So congratulations on all that aspect of it. But I did find myself thinking, and as you were talking about performing training and, having staff and, asset property coordinators, how big of an organization typically did you have to do asset management and government property management in these organizations?
Yeah, I think when I was just going to run through the order here, FEMA was probably up to 150 to 250 property custodial officers throughout the nation, and then Office of Surface Mining was a lot less. It was a lot smaller, probably 50 at the most. And then over to on Fish and Wildlife, I left that out. That was 10 different 8 regions. So I would say about 150 to 250 there. And then going over to the headquarters with the 10 regions, probably anywhere from 300 to 500 custodial officers throughout the nation. And then for Department of Homeland Security with ICE, I'd probably say back to about 150 to 250. So I think Department of Interior was probably the most with the most people that I dealt with. Now on top of that, in December of I forget what year it was, but I also became the second-handed departmental fleet manager as well for over 36,000 vehicles for Department of Interior, and transitioning in and trying to get different things going there. So with that, if I would have doubled up to maybe 1,000 with both property and fleet managers out in the field.
There's a lot of people doing asset management in the federal government for sure. For sure.
Certainly.
It's amazing. So, what would you say some of the big differences are between the time you started, back in the military, or, when you started as a civilian to, what
Well,
you see going on now? Is it pretty much the
yes,
same, or is it very different?
that's a good question. Initially, before I got out of the military, enlisted, I was a UNIVAC 1050 computer operator, programmer, and scheduler. If anybody has any idea about UNIVAC 1050, it was one of the first computers ever, and it took up like a warehouse. It was huge, and we used to call them the heavies because they come in with their kits, their tool kits that drag into the floor. So we call them the heavies. They come in and try to fix copper wiring for the UNIVAC 1050. There was so much wiring in that it could go to the moon and back 7 times just for one UNIVAC 1050. So to think about the capability of what we have today in tablets and smaller laptops, there's more power and more ability to work with an individual than UNIVAC 1050. Yeah. So I think that was transitioning from utilizing manual processes. I can remember when I started in Campion, Alaska. It was 100 miles from Arctic Circle, and everything was in triplet. You had to use carbon, to insert in between the pages, and if you wasn't heavy enough, then you had to go back and retrace like step copies 3 through 6. So that was the old days when all the forms had carbons in them and so forth. So I think that's one of the most tremendous things we've done. I know some of the sessions I attended in the National Education Seminar was the use of drones. So not only in farming, agricultural, but also with the ability to use it for different inventories, and it can go places where most people can't fly. So it can really do some good accounting processes. I think the changes in barcodes with going to the little cube barcode and with the readability, I think a good example is FedEx, where in their centers they use these high-speed machines to track, and even USPS is doing it now as well. So I think that's one of the significant changes from where we were and where we are now. I'm starting to take a little time to look at the AI, artificial intelligence, to see what that's going to do. I think that they'll have some role in the future. Hope I have the opportunity to see how that impacts property and logistics. I think as long as they don't have a robot that replaces us, I'm good with it. So, so I think that's something for the future that will have an impact. Other changes I could think about is the barcoding I talked about, the computers. I think the training is another area that with virtual environments and with the blogs and with all the social posts. I'm not much for social posts, but I think that there's a more avenue for communication than we ever had before, and I think that opens up new arenas in the virtual world for people to get trained that way, and I think that's very helpful as well.
Do you see, one of the things I noticed, getting involved in the ISO standards and ASTM standards is it seemed to would open a lot of doors for government property managers, as we call them, and NPMA professionals in general. Have you seen much of that? Have you seen people moving into other areas of asset management?
So that's a good point, Jim. And Department of Homeland Security actually served, I think, first year as a member with the ASTM. Attended the meetings at NES, National Education Seminars. And then I know some of the initial inventory rules that were standards. I tried to indoctrinate that into policy at Department of Homeland Security. I'm sorry, Department of Interior. I was able to do that. And the next step that I was hoping to take was to venture into ISO 55,000. I think that's about the time that working with the ALN, I remember those meetings that we're having over in across the river there. Can't think of it, but I know we're meeting there and we're working on developing a executive order for that Pacific administration for try to get ISO 55,000 started for federal government. So I think that, and then when I left Department of Interior and went over to the Department of Homeland Security to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is I carried that ISO 55,000 with me and was hoping to get it started. I could always get it on the agenda and get it as part as my performance, but I couldn't get it into engaging the rest of the organization. Now, my most recent boss is very interested in ISO 55,000, and he thinks it has a role and a place. And I hope to, to get a foot in the door and be able to assist him in the future with getting that rolling. So I think that there's an opportunity there. But that's about, the least amount, but, it only takes one hole in the dike, so to speak, before you have a flood. So you just have to continue to work the process.
Yeah, eventually it'll be an overnight success, right? Years ago, can't remember how long ago now, I did some consulting work to help write some personal property procedures at Homeland Security. And it was while we were in the process of developing the original, in the current version of ISO 55,000 documents, and incorporated some of those ideas into the procedures. And then Jack Dempsey, that is one of our senior fellows, was working with the real property people there. And I know he incorporated some of those ideas as well. Which brings me to a question. Did you, one of the issues I always saw on the federal side was there's lots of different people doing asset management under different names and for different types of assets. You mentioned fleet, we talked mainly about personal property management with the NPMA, although that includes some real property, but real property management and IT asset management. Did you have any thoughts, or you see any progress on coordinating activities across those boundaries within the agencies?
So let me think for a second. Coordinating activities. So I think the newest, and as a result of COVID-19, has been the personal protective equipment. It's taken on a new light. I think it was obviously that we got caught with our pants down, so to speak, that we didn't have sufficient items to support the masses. And it's not thinkable to be able to pre-stock most of the PPE because it has some of the items have shelf life items. So I think that determining an operational level for daily operation requirements versus pandemic requirement. And then the Department of Homeland Security got smart on this, and what they did is they developed a 5-year contract that they put the burden on the vendor to be able to provide individual requirements to all the 22 components, which still fall under Department of Homeland Security, including the United States Coast Guard. So now, and what happened with that was good from the standpoint that our customers within each component goes directly to the website and they order their PPE. But what happened is we lost control on what they're ordering. When the federal government purchases and makes a contract with a vendor, that they go for the lowest bid and probably the cheapest price, and their system of tracking wasn't very good, because I kept asking my PPE manager, who's buying what and how much are they buying, and he couldn't tell me. Basically, it was just straight order. It goes in and they fill the order from one of their warehouses. So I think that there needs to be some coordination on that part, and I think that that'll get better as things go. Knock on wood that we don't have to have another massive requirement for PPI, or for personal protective equipment, PPE. I think that's one area that could be coordinated on. The fleet is another one where it requires, with the new push for electronic vehicles. Even though I'm not in asset management division right now, I know that it's a pain as it was before. Was the infrastructure has to sort of be built prior to springing a bunch of electrical vehicles onto the scene. I just recently traveled to Kentucky for a funeral, and I pulled into, I think it was a sheet station, and all I saw was one type of vehicle electronic stand. It wasn't universal. It was only for certain type of electrical vehicles. And I go like, well, that's strange. How far do you have to drive to get there? And then, so the infrastructure still needs to be developed, but also, I think there's a lot of, not only that, but developing our facilities of the future, which is really difficult in this environment, because after COVID, I would say a very large percentage did not return to work. They continued to work in a virtual environment. So I think trying to have facilities and garages managed really by General Service Administration, the majority of them are managed by GSA and leased facilities. And then, there was always a requirement, and there's a federal law that for so many number of parking spaces, you have to have so many disabled parking spots. Well, the same thing is you're going to have a requirement for electric vehicles, and then it's going to develop on the type of vehicles that you have for your particular outfit. So there's going to be some issues and problems there, and I think it's going to take a lot of integration and coordination between activities, not only for asset, but for facilities, which is a real property asset. And I think there's going to be more integration than we've ever had before. I think there's still a big gray area when it comes to facilities that have weapons in those facilities. I know there's reasons for not identifying really, so much on the floor plan exactly what that is. But I think that when it comes to I attended an AL meeting that we had in Washington, D.C., and there was some speakers talking about different data systems that they had that was going to incorporate everything you can know about a facility. But when it came down to warehouses, and those warehouses containing weapons and so forth, was a gray area. So I think that that's another area that's going to be coordination on and everything. And in today's environment, with the way things are going and everything, I think that we need to ensure that we know where our assets are at all times, and able to secure those and identify where those are at the typical level that they need to be. So I think this coordination needs to be done there as well.
Well, Mike's been waiting to ask a couple questions, I'm sure. So, Mike, you have.
Okay.
I've been enjoying it, Al. You've been addressing everything I've been wanting to hear about, and Jim, you jumped in with questions that I wanted to. But basically, Al, when you started, it was logistics, and then it evolved into asset management. It seems like.
So so you're asking how I started?
Yeah.
At the very beginning, or just with federal, or?
Very beginning is fine.
Well, the very beginning, I was, I took one of those tests so they could figure out what kind of specialty you should do in the military. So when I saw a monkey wrench, I said it's a screwdriver, and when I saw a screwdriver, I said it was a monkey wrench. So I definitely didn't want to be a mechanic, and my dad was employed at a ice cream dairy he pasteurized milk and so forth. But the boss said, hey, when you go in the Air Force, you want to go into supply. Supply is always in the background of all the wars and everything. So you want to go into supply. So I told him I wanted to be a supply specialist. So that's how I ended up getting a supply. And my first assignment was to a remote assignment in Campion Air Force Station, Alaska. It's no longer there. I was responsible for low gator tracking MiGs flying in over the Yukon River from Russia. And then we had F-106s. I'm really dating myself here, Delta fighter jets that would chase them out across the Yukon back to Alaska. I mean, back to Russia. So, but 100 miles from Arctic Circle. So it was an experience. Just a very quick side story. A friend of mine that also got sent there with me, he wanted to go bear hunting. He got the bear license. He had 30-06 and I had a shotgun. He said, Al, you go up front. I want you to shoot first. And what he wanted me to do is to piss off the bear so the bear would start running at me and then he'd be able to have a moving target. I said, I don't think so. So I didn't do that. So it was a true story. So, but from supply, I was supply enlisted for 11 years and I got out as a E5 staff sergeant in 1979 and took administrative discharge and went to California State University, Fresno, and it's like 26 different universities. Right thereafter, I got accepted at Fresno State. I actually got an acceptance for Berkeley, but I was still happy I went to Fresno. That would probably have been 2 left or 2 right or something like that. So if I went to Berkeley, hopefully I'm not offending anybody who went to Berkeley, but California State University was a great opportunity to get a degree. Got my degree in economics, and they asked what field I wanted to go to become an officer. I said I'd like to be a supply logistics officer, and so I got into the supply again. Normally you don't because they're afraid you're going to end up supervising somebody that you worked with before, and oddly enough, that never happened. So I think I got converted when I went to. I joined federal ranks in 1999. DL, he set up a class with National Park Management Association. Mike was the trainer. Can't remember his last name. His partner there is Lynn Brown, who's really big in MP&A.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Lynn Brown. And then, so he taught a class, and because of my background in the military, I was able to get the 3 certifications for specialist administrator and also a professional manager at the same time. And then years later, I actually got the opportunity to become a consultant fellow. So
Well,
go ahead.
we've run through our time, but well, first I want to say just congratulations on such a remarkable career and the difference. We haven't gotten to talk too much about the NPMA, but you've made a big difference in the NPMA, and you've set an example for many of your willingness to take on big topics and to make big things happen and not to just react. So, you know, I've always looked up to you as, you know, one of the shining lights on the federal side and in asset and government property management. So I want to thank you. And I also want to ask you, is there any final thought you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, I final thought really quick is I think that that all members should take advantage of whatever they're part of and find a way to participate, find a way to you know, be the new sheriff in town and try to advocate the processes and try to get leadership on board. I know it's a tough thing to do. There's no special way to do that, but I think that's the way people should take advantage of the opportunity to improve their work environment. And I think that their team will always appreciate that. And the final thing I would say is always take care of your team because you're nothing as a leader without your team. Again, in order to be a leader, you have to have a team behind you and you have to take care of them. And my boss just told me the other day that he said the biggest thing he's going to miss when I leave is the leadership that I have provided. And I was actually brought into the safety occupational health to be a leader. I had no credentials or nothing in safety. And the staff was 2 and now it's 26. and almost it's going to double in 2024. So it's got a great future. I was able to help make that grow. So that's what I'll leave you with.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Al, for taking time with us. Thank you, Jim, for connecting us to Al. And Nick, will you take us home?
Of course, yeah. Thanks a lot, Al. I liked hearing some of those stories, especially about your time of the warehouse-sized computer. That was before my time, but I like hearing about that. Big thanks to our platinum member Onuma System and our patron members, Definitive Logic, CGI, ABS, Quality Evaluations, and Jacobs, and all our organizational members. Big thank you for continuing support that allows us to do programs like this in our upcoming event, January 10th. So we hope to see you all there for more discussion about federal facility optimization and management.
And I'll take a moment just now to say that that's a picture of Mike Imany, who's the chair of the National Academy Strategies for Renewing Federal Facilities. And the other image is Amelia Secoy, who was with the GAO and started the report that will be presented, but she retired at the beginning of this year, 2024, and is now an active ALN member and helped us kickstart this program. So we look forward to seeing you in person. Nick had put the registration link in the chat earlier, so we'll hang on for just a second longer if anybody wants to scroll up and click on that link. We hope to see you on the 10th in Washington, DC, and otherwise we'll see you next week on ALN Thursday and 3. Thank you all.